Hello and welcome to my Z1-R information video. There's a couple of reasons for this video. Number one, I'm auctioning off this exceptional, one-of-a-kind, and my idea of a perfect 1978 Kawasaki Z1-R in probably early to mid-April on Bring a Trailer auction website. I'll try to post the links in the comment section below when I get the pictures ready and the auction listing goes live. The second reason is to show why this bike handles so well and to show the Kawasaki Z riders, whether it's a Z1 or KZ900, 1000, Z1R, Mark II, whatever, what is needed to be done to make the bikes handle better than they ever thought possible. I'll give you a history of this bike, the modifications done to it, and a detailed explanation of what I think causes bad handling and what you can do to fix it. A note to anyone watching, if you're looking for a box stock out of the crate Z1, this isn't it. This bike looks mostly stock but is extensively modified and would classify as a resto mod. This Z1-R is in exceptional condition, has 5,944 miles. It rides perfectly and handles as well as any bike I've ever ridden. I know that sounds unbelievable, but watch this video to the end and you'll see why. This bike has never been down or wrecked. The seat and all of the bodywork are factory original and in perfect condition with no scratches, dents, or dings anywhere. This bike has been meticulously maintained and everything works as new. The engine has never been apart except to put in cams, clutch plates, and springs. It runs and shifts perfectly and has no leaks anywhere. It has never had any ethanol containing fuel used in it and has always run on alcohol-free premium, and the carbs are drained when not being ridden. It's kept in a covered covered in a climate-controlled building and has never been to a high-pressure car wash. Always washed by hand with a hose and mitt. Twice a year, the bike gets hosed down with Glide, which I buy from Napa for about 15 bucks a gallon or so. It's an amazing preservative, cleaner, and rubber lubricant that works wonders, preserving pretty much everything on the bike. I spray the bike down with it and let it set 15 to 30 minutes and then wash the bike as normal. If you don't wash the bike afterwards, it leaves a white hazy stuff on the rubber and things, so you need to wash it off after it gets done soaking. It extends the life of rubber, vinyl, plastic, leather, and the wiring nearly indefinitely. This bike's almost 50 years old and everything looks new on it. I also treated all the electrical connections with dielectric grease to prevent corrosion. All of the bolts and nuts were coated with a thin layer of grease, also to prevent corrosion when the bike was assembled and anytime they're removed or reinstalled. When storing for winter, it gets serviced, Glided, washed, waxed, carbs run out of gas and then drained of all remaining fuel, which is why the carbs look new inside, as is visible in the pictures I'll post later. Now let's go over the bike's modifications. All parts installed on the bike were new when installed. Let's start with the engine. It's a stock 1015 cc displacement and has stock compression. It has 29 millimeter smoothbore MkIIs in new condition and have been serviced, replacing all the O-ring seals. It has Andrews 2X cams and springs, a Dyna 3 electronic ignition with high performance Andrews coils. It has Barnett clutch plates and springs and a roller bearing clutch release instead of the nylon screw type. This Z1-R has a limited production Bassani Superbike pipe that is extremely high quality, gives as good a ground clearance as any pipe I've ever seen, and the best part, the pipe can be removed and replaced in about a minute. If you've ever changed the oil and filter on any Z model Kawasaki with a header, you know what a pain all those nuts and washers and flanges and half sleeves and gaskets are to get juggled into place when you're trying to bolt that pipe up. This pipe has fixed all of that mess by making a double wall spigot that bolts permanently to the head and stays on there. To remove the pipe, you just remove the rear foot peg bolt, wiggle on the pipe, and it slides out of the spigots on the head and you're done. Change the oil and filter, slide the pipe back into the spigots and put the foot peg bolt back in, and that's it. This bike is fitted with a new sealed AGM battery and a washable K&N air filter. Now let's talk about the bike. All bright items on the bike that weren't chromed from the factory are polished. The bike rides on Pirelli Sport Demon tires mounted on Italian EPM racing mags. The wheels look stock but are a much wider WM4 on the front and a WM6 on the rear, which is about the widest rims that will fit in the stock width forks and swing arm. EPM Racing makes the wheels in both magnesium and aluminum, and these are aluminum. EPM was, just a little note on EPM and Arturo Magni. EPM was started and run by Arturo Magni, who was MV Agusta's racing manager for 25 years and won 75 world championships in that time with riders like Michael Wood, Giacomo Agostini, John Surtees, among others. That's quite a feat, averaging 3 world champions for 25 straight years. Pretty amazing. This Z1-R has a high-performance fork kit with heavy-duty fork springs, low stiction fork seals, and special dampeners with an extra inch of travel over stock. We had to raise the bikes up an inch to keep the engine side covers from dragging in the corners, even with those Pirelli street tires. The forks also have tapered roller bearings in the neck. All of the brake components have been fitted with new seals and kits for both of the master cylinders and all 3 calipers. All 3 calipers also have been fitted with stainless steel pistons and steel braided brake lines. The brakes also have custom drilled and polished discs. The bike has custom made aluminum rear sets and a hollow, lightweight chrome moly brake stay arm instead of the heavy factory cast steel arm. It saves several pounds of unsprung weight on that back wheel. The S&W Street Stroker shocks have been laid down for more travel and frame gusted for extra support. Now let's get into the frame mods that will make it handle. The Z1-R comes with some improvements that the older Z1s didn't have, like stronger neck bracing right in here. This is a much better brace than what they put on Z1s. And also, most people don't know, it has double thickness down tubes right here on the front of the frame. They've just put a sleeve on the outside of this down tube, drilled holes in it, and then plug welded it here and then welded the top and bottom. But if you feel, you can feel the edge of the sleeve here and the edge of the sleeve right down here underneath the pipes. So Kawasaki knew they had a problem with the handling and they tried fixing it. And it also has a substantial fork brace built into the front fender. They've got a stamped steel brace that shapes the fender, mimics the shape of the fender, and it's riveted to the steel fender, and these crossbars are then bolted to the fork. That's a very substantial fork brace that works very good and a decent looking fender too. So, okay, to get the frames ready for the mods that was done, it was completely disassembled. The frame and the swing arm were sandblasted, bolted into jigs, and all the gussets were heliarc welded in place, and all of the visible factory mud dauber looking welds were cleaned up to look nice and heliarc welded if needed. The frame and swing arm were left in the jigs and put in a heat treat oven to normalize the welds and relieve the stress, and a mild heat treat put in the frame for stiffness. Then epoxy primered and painted with Imron polyurethane. I feel one of the most important things to make a motorcycle handle is to tie this fork neck area where the fork bolts solidly with where the rear swing arm bolts. It needs to be tied together so they can't move independently of each other. That's those moving independently and letting the wheels to go different directions is what gives you that famous hinge in the middle feeling when you start pushing them in the corners. The frames are actually flexing in those areas. One of the weakest part of the frames, probably altogether, is this area right in here. And everybody braces them up. Kawasaki's even went to putting braces in them. This is a much better brace than what the old Z1s had. And I think they just had a strap across here in the Z1s. This is the 5th bike I've done like this. The old Z1s, we just put a plate kind of like this in there between it and welded those in. But now this has a tube in there, which is okay. But we put in these braces here, and we put in a couple braces in this corner of this frame right here on both sides. That helps, and like I said, if they don't have anything between those tubes, you'd have to put a plate in there, fish plate in there to stiffen it up. And those do a good job of stiffening that area and keeping the neck fairly tight. So, and I use flat plates in here, where a lot of people, like Eddie Lawson's road race bike, it had 2 tubes welded in here, one here and one here on both sides. And that's an okay, good, decent idea, because it does keep these tubes from going like this. But I like these plates better because of the shear movement. When this starts moving around, you could also have these tubes going like this. When you put just a round tube in there, it's not very, unless you gusset the sides and corners of it, it's not very strong to keep these tubes from going like this. These plates like this are more like the web of an I-beam. It will keep those tubes not only from going in and out, but it'll keep it from doing this number at all. So, mainly I like that flat plate because of the shear load, but also we need it to bolt that, and I'll talk about that later. But the next important step is to make the engine a structural component to the frame. And that's done on nearly all motorcycles and everything that's new, and you know, they're learning that that's the way to do it. And that's what needs to be done on this. Because the engine is a very rigid block of aluminum, and everything is much stronger when the engine and the frame are locked together as one and can't move independently. And the way we did this on this, we went to the next size up aircraft hardware. And a lot of these holes, well, if you've ever had the motor mount bolts out of a Z model Kawasaki, you probably noticed that the bolts were extremely loose and wobbly in the holes. These holes like this, these are aircraft bolts, but we had to take about 10 thousandths out of them to get a much bigger aircraft bolt in there. You can see the difference right here. I hope you can see this. You can see the difference in size of the bolts and also the quality of the bolts. Much nicer, much sturdier. And the worst part about it is you have these threads halfway down the bolt. Well, that means half of what you're, or a third or whatever, of what you're supporting is riding on these threads. And there's no way to get anything structurally sound by riding on those threads. So the aircraft bolts have full shanks and just have threads where the bolts go, or where the nut goes. So much better in that regard. The factory probably made all of these bolts this loose just for ease of assembly and quickness in production, but it's not very good for stability. All of the motor mounts received the same treatment, as well as thicker and stronger motor mount plates. If you look at the difference between the factory bolt, I talked about that. The factory bolts are much smaller and threaded half of the bolt length. After making the engine a stressed member with the frame, the next area of concern is the swing arm pivot area. This area right in here. With the undersized bolts, the oversized holes, the rear motor mount plate only bolting the this is an added plate here. Normally it just has that inside plate in there. And if you take a tube coming down and you put a plate on the side of it, there's not much strength there. You can't really hold that, especially when the holes are real big and the bolts are real sloppy. Not much strength in that. Okay, so what we do then is to fix this, so you start with a 1/2 inch stainless steel rear motor mount bolt. You add another plate to the outside of this tube here, same on the other side. You put an aluminum spacer between those two plates, and you redo the aluminum spacers that come from that the Kawasaki made for the engine, because they were pretty small diameter. These are much larger. And once you get tight fitting bolts into here, and this 1/2 inch stainless steel bolt, it's just a bolt with threads on both sides, there's a nut on both sides, but when you tighten that down, that essentially boxes all of this tubes and all of that together, because this 1/2 inch bolt holds that solid. With those spacers, nothing can flex there. And then you've got plates on both sides of the frame. It's not going to let this frame move like that. It's going to be held completely solid. All these motor mount plates have structural washers on them to strengthen them even more. Next area of concern is the swing arms. We've got all this stiffened up really well now. It can't move at all with that big bolt in there, clamping everything down, boxing it in. Then we got a swing arm that's a weak swing arm. Basically gusseted in 3 areas. The area in front of the tire, that brace that the factory puts in here in between the tubes and in front of the tire, it has a small gusseting from the factory, but it leaves several inches between the back tire and that gusset. We fill in the area between the tubes right up to the tire. We've stamped a couple sheets of sheet metal, leave the original gusset in there, then weld this one in that you can see pretty well hugs the tire. And the reason we did that, you could take the old gusset out and weld a whole new gusset in, but I like the idea of just adding on to that one that's there. That gives you 2 vertical points, or 2 vertical pieces in that gusset that gives it much more strength for very little weight added. The next thing we did was took a piece of chrome moly sheet and bent it into a 60-degree V, and it runs from all the way to the back here of the swing arm to here, all the way up to the front tube, up to the front pivot tube. Both sides have got that chrome moly brace. It's a V brace that just lays on the bottom of the tube. It's welded full length both sides and goes all the way up to the pivot tube. The other thing we do on those is the swing arm pivot tube goes across this way, and the 2 side tubes come in, and there's about 1 inch or so of unsupported tube from the swing arm to where it hits the frame inside there. So we take a piece of chrome moly tube and cut it so it gussets into that corner and has like a 45-degree tube gusset that goes all the way around it, all the way out to the edge of the swing arm where it matches the frame right here. So, and then all the way back to the tube, stiffening the swing arm considerably. The swing arm was then fitted with a 0 clearance swing arm pivot bolt. This setup has very close tolerance bushings and a hollow chrome moly pivot shaft that is slitted on each end where the pivot shaft sets in the frame. So this area right in here, the pivot shaft is slit about that far to where it rides in the frame. And these bolts here, there's a bolt on each side. The other side has a grease zerk on it, so you can grease, and the shaft's drilled and the bushings are drilled, so you can grease the swing arm very easily. But these bolts are tapered. You slide the pivot shaft in and get it shimmed good for clearance between the frame and the swing arm, and then you tighten these bolts down, and that basically swells out the pivot shaft to tightly bite into the frame hole. So there's no slack whatsoever in there, and it doesn't put the side loads on where a normal swing arm bolt, when you tighten that up, it just smashes the frame together to the swing arm and basically binds it up. It's got sleeve spacers in there and make it supposed to go free, but most of the time it puts a pretty good bind on the swing arm. This one here, once you get it fully installed and tightened up, that swing arm just floats as free as can be in there, which is the way it should be. Okay, we're done with all that. That's basically, if you do that to a Z1, and you don't have to do all of that stuff. You can do any one of those things, and it's going to help the handling some. But if you want it to handle, like I say, as good as any bike you've ever had, you need to do all of this to it. Now, we're done with all of that, but there's still one very important thing that you probably noticed. I even talked about it a little bit. And this will make the bike as strong as I think you're ever going to get it to be. We've made the engine a structural member tied into the frame, and we've got all this super strong in here. It's not going to move anywhere, and all this is strong, and this is strong. And we brace that up to where the tubes aren't going to move around on the neck. But if you notice, to have the motor be a structural member of the frame, that's really good, and everything's nice and tight everywhere on it, except it's not really a structural member of the frame because the rear motor mounts right here, and so you have no support from here all the way up into here to here and down all the way here to this front motor mount underneath the header pipes. So this whole top of the frame, even though we've gusted this and made it a lot stronger, that fork's still going to want to move it around because there's nothing to hold it in place other than this and this. You got half of the frame, 10 feet of tubing or something, there that can still move around. So, I feel the best way to remedy that is with an upper motor mount that I call a quad pod, just because easiest name for it. What it does, it's two individual pieces with 2 legs each, so there's 4 legs going down and 2 places to bolt up here. It's bolted solidly right here, and then there's 8 bolts in the valve cover that holds the bottom of it down. It's very substantial in strength and ties all of this completely solid. Eliminates any flex whatsoever on there, because you can see from that, it used to be we were here to here supporting all of this. Now we've got a substantial pyramid style brace right there that will not let that move whatsoever. Works extremely well, and one of the better things about it, like if you got to do valve, set your valves or something, you only have to remove these 2 bolts more than the rest of the bolts you replace, because these come out with the valve cover. So it's just those 2 bolts, the only extra bolts you have to deal with for a substantial improvement in handling. With all of these mods done, this Z1-R has no shakes, no wobbles, and no hinge in the middle feeling. Just super stable, confidence-inspired handling. Now, we're pretty well done. I'm going to do a slow walk around with the camera so you can stop the video whenever you need to look at closer things. And I'll have detailed photos showing close-ups of everything, hopefully online, but at least on the auction listing at Bring a Trailer. And that's going to be the first week or 2, probably in April of 25. I'll try to provide a link to the pictures and the auction listing below. Okay, well, I'm going to walk around now and do a slow walk around it so you can see everything. Thanks for watching, and I hope you learned something. Okay. Kind of one thing that I'd like to say about this, I mentioned this was the 5th bike that I've done. Well, I'm a real picky guy. I don't let anybody ride my bikes. The mule, engineering mule that I used for these bikes is my old Z1, and I've had it for over 50 years, and I've only let 4 people ride it in 50 years. And every one of those 4 people wanted me to build one just like it. So I guess that says something about how good it handles and what a big improvement it makes. Sorry if I'm a little wobbly. There will be many still photos showing everything very detailed and very complete photos. Like I say, you can stop the video when you're watching it and see anything that I covered too quickly, but at least you'll get an idea of what you're looking at. As soon as I get the body work back on it, I'll get it out and start taking pictures of it and hopefully have those online within a few days, or as soon as I can anyway. How about that? You can tell I'm not a camera operator, I guess. Okay, thanks for watching and happy motoring.